Hello, this is Faith at Catholic Unschooling Coach, and this is the video where I'm going to talk about the curriculum that actually did work for us over the years. So my approach is that unschooling really is the most efficient, best way to learn. But sometimes you do need to use curriculum. It's just one tool in the chest, right, in your drawer. And so I don't equate curriculum with education the way I would say 90% of homeschoolers do. So anyway, so let me just get started. I'll go through this quickly, and it might not be as helpful because everything's, has to be qualified. But anyway, so my kids had LDs. They had vision tracking problems and focusing problems and eye fatigue problems and processing issues and all sorts of things, attention. They had various things they had to overcome. And so I'll start with reading because that's a basic skill that sort of is the bedrock of education. And they didn't read till about their 9th year, all 5 of them. My daughter was the earliest. She read when she was like 8.5. My oldest son, who was officially diagnosed dyslexic, read right before his 9th birthday. And this was years of doing phonics and that sort of thing with him. And then all my others, I can't even remember when my youngest learned to read. I don't remember. And she was the most recent, but I think it had become unimportant to me by then because I knew she was going to do it eventually, and it didn't matter because once they learned to read, within a year, they were up to grade level, and then they would go beyond. So it didn't really seem to matter. But with those first kids, I was so panicky about them not reading, especially I was an early reader myself. So I thought it would just come magically the way it did for me, and it didn't. And that was a real strong source of anxiety for me. And I tried many different programs that were all failures. And then I finally found this one. And this is like this self-published old program that I know nowadays people do, All About Reading, I think is the one that's really popular. But at last, a reading method for every child. And Mary Petchy is the woman who wrote it. And she has, I will link below, I always forget exactly what it is, but she has a website, I think it's called Online Reading Tutor, something like that, but I'll link to it. And what was great about this was that it's both phonics and what she calls sound words. Phonics words are sound words, and sight words are study words. That's what she would introduce everything very methodically, very low-key way. But what was really wonderful is she had a script. You could buy a script from her, and it would take you through every single lesson. And she said in 6 months, your child will be reading. And that's exactly what happened. So I followed that script, which was a godsend. But because by that time I was so burned out and anxious and felt like such a failure, it was wonderful to have a script and not have to think about it. And I was pretty consistent. I mean, I always say the only thing I'm consistent at is being inconsistent. But I was pretty consistent at it with my oldest son, and it did work. Now, she has since that time, I'm talking, a while ago. My son's now 28. But she has since written her own readers. But at the time, she synced her program with a couple of different how do you say it? BASAL readers. And the one that I already happened to have were the Pathway readers. So these are these Mennonite readers that I think you can get from Rod and Staff. Now, some people don't like these readers because they don't have people in them, and they're very black and white. They're simple. But my kids liked them, I think, because we read Little House so much that they really liked the country. Sort of the farm depiction of life. So anyway, so these are what worked for us. And these really worked. I used these, and then later on when I got a little more confident, I This is the only one I can find now. This is Reader D, but I have the whole set. These little angel readers are Catholic, so I intersperse them, So we would work on this. Oh, and I forgot the Bob books. Okay, I can't show you the Bob books, but you know what they are. So once I realized how to teach reading, which I learned from At Last, A Reading Method for Every Child, and once we had gone through these and they really worked, I felt more confident, and I found this, and I've showed this a couple of times already, Phonics Pathways, and I started to use this with the Bob books, those, I should have brought them in. I would use those first, using the methods from At Last, A Reading Method for Every Child, and then I would move on to this and these. So those were the things that really worked for my LD kids when it came to teaching reading. It was At Last, A Reading Method for Every Child. Phonics Pathways came later once I knew what I was doing. The Bob books, and then these pathway readers. We only ever did the first couple of ones. We didn't do the whole set. And then these little angel readers. I didn't bother with the workbooks either. The workbooks didn't really, sometimes we would do them, but we never finished them very much. But just the reading and getting your kids to read out loud to you regularly is a good thing also. So that was reading. For writing, so I had one son who was diagnosed dysgraphic, and he had to have occupational therapy. And so all my kids had shadows of that. Writing just didn't come that easily to most of them. And so my husband decreed that we had to practice writing, which was unusual. That's the only time he ever did anything like that. But when he saw, the occupational therapy wasn't covered by insurance. It was really expensive. So I think that's what motivated him to lay down the law about writing. So now Handwriting Without Tears hadn't come out when my older kids were little. But for the younger set of kids, we did use a Handwriting Without Tears, the very beginning set, the kind with the wood blocks, the flat blocks where you can make the letter shapes. There's a circle and a half circle and long and short, little boards that you can stick together. My kids liked making the letter shapes, and there was a slate with a little smiley face that oriented you, because that was the thing my kids really had trouble with, was just learning where to start the letter. They would get in a bad habit of starting, from being down and going up instead of the other way around or whatever it was, and it would always make it more tiresome. It's tiring on the arm and on the hand if you're not forming your letters correctly. I came to the belief that people who teach handwriting really know what they're talking about. They know what the easiest way to write is, and you just have to train yourself to hold that pencil correctly and to not tense up your arm and to start the letters the right way, and all that stuff is important. The way you slant your paper and all that stuff, it's all important. They really know what they're talking about. So just follow the directions. This is a good time to learn to be docile. Not a mat that people can walk over, but I mean by docile, teachable, letting yourself be teachable. So Handwriting Without Tears was what we started with, and then I think we usually did the first and second workbooks of that, which are these flat, long books, and you just practice in really large script, which makes it easier for the kids. So the first and second workbooks for that, I don't know if we would complete the second one, but we'd start it. And then we would move on, because we really didn't like the way Handwriting Without Tears looked. So we wound up moving to Memoria Press, their copybooks. And they have manuscript copybooks, and what was nice about that is they'd have a quote on top, and then you would just copy it, because since my kids had trouble with tracking and focus, it was hard if you're copying something, to go from a book over here and then over to the notebook to write it down correctly. So those copybooks, and they had the lines and everything. So those early manuscript copybooks from Memoria Press were the next step for our handwriting. So Handwriting Without Tears, Memoria Press. Then when we got into cursive, we didn't like the cursive of Memoria Press. So then we did all sorts of different we tried all sorts of different things, but I think the most successful one was from Catholic Heritage curriculum. They're nice and flat, and they're spiral bound at the top, and you can flip them open. And they had a nice, simple but pretty cursive. So I think that was the most popular cursive. Now, I wanted my kids to learn regular cursive because I wanted them to be able to read it. So that if you found an old letter or whatever, you would know how to decipher it. But they didn't stick with that in high school. They really all seemed, I think my oldest writes in regular cursive, but I think all the others switched to italic. That was the thing that they wound up with in high school. So whatever, you can just get italic handwriting from, I don't know, a bookstore or Amazon or whatever. Just look up italic. I don't think there's nothing, I don't recall any particular curriculum. I just recall the style. And by that time they were old enough that they could, they could track because most of them had vision therapy. So then they could just copy from, the book they're reading or, the Bible or whatever it was that they were using for their copy work. And then they would copy it over in italic. So that's reading and that's handwriting. For math, unschooling really worked for us for math. I mean, and unschooling, like I said before, didn't mean not learning. I read lots of books about math. I posted things about math in our kitchen so we could look at them. We did math problems. Trying to figure out how long till Christmas or how old somebody was in some particular year, or figuring out a tip or something like that, or sometimes I would, if they got birthday money from a grandparent, then they could sit and go through a catalog and figure out what they could spend, or we did all sorts of things. We had a little math station. We did all sorts of things. So unschooling, and then we would do some worksheet stuff, just interspersed, just sort of thrown in there. So they had workbooks, Kumon books, and other books. We would do the press, I always say it wrong, the test prep workbooks, like from Spectrum. We'd do like sort of a mini unit study, not a unit study, but we would take, say, 6 weeks or something to prep for the test. So that would be something that would be in our routine. So, but when they got to about 7th grade, it varied for kids, but mostly it was 7th grade. I think just varied for one child, and that was because that child requested a textbook in 6th grade. But we mostly did Saxon, and what happened more often than not was in 7th grade, and I didn't teach it because I couldn't teach higher math to save anybody's life. And so we would get a math tutor, and they would start off with, most likely with Saxon 8-7, and they would sit down, and the first fourth or third of Saxon is review of everything else that they've been learning. So you just go through it, and we'd find out that the kids knew a lot more than they thought they did, only this time it was just methodical. And then they would move on, and this is going to sound miraculous, but they could get through 8-7 in their about 7th grade year, and then go on and do algebra in 8th grade with no formal math. Now, they had lots of math informally, but they hadn't had any, not very much anyway, formal math, very, very little. So Saxon became our mainstay, and a lot of people are critical of Saxon, but it really worked for us, because my kids, it turns out, they didn't want anything fancy. They didn't want any whistles and bells. They didn't want lots of bright colors and gimmicks or anything like that. They always felt condescended to with that kind of thing. They just wanted the facts. They just wanted to learn what they needed to know. When it turned out that, yes, they did have to sit down and study math formally, they just wanted it given to them without any sort of, trying to make it fun or sugar it up or whatever. They just wanted it. And they actually really enjoyed Saxon. So Saxon Math in high school, that's what worked. And a lot of this is that, for my kids, the reading had to come through actual lessons, and I tried to make them short lessons, short and as pleasant as possible, and always ending on an up note. But I would just do one-on-one with them. It still had an informal feel. I mean, a lot of times we just sat on the couch and did it that way. So handwriting and reading, we had to have formal lessons. And then when they got into junior high and high school, they started to get much more formal. So let's see. And then of course you have language. When you're in high school, so you have to get all those credits. And we really wanted our kids to be able to say that they had a high school degree, that they really had earned that diploma. And we weren't comfortable with trying to take the stuff that they did and turn it into a transcript. We wanted to say that they actually had worked through a book. And the reason why, there's a couple of reasons why. One was that my kids, when they got to adolescence, they really needed structure. They needed more structure. They kind of lost their mojo. I think they would all go into sort of a little bit of depression because of the hormonal. Well, some of them went into a lot of depression. But because of the hormonal changes, that was just the way they reacted. And so they actually needed more structure in high school than they did when they were younger. And they just had this sort of joy of living and being curious about everything. And, they wanted to sleep a lot and eat a lot, and they wanted to hang out with friends, and they were moody, and, and testing limits because they trying to work out independence and, all that psychological stuff, differentiating themselves from their parental units. But they just needed, but also we wanted them to be able to go on to college easily. They didn't have to go on to college. I mean, all of them did, but my middle son tried a couple of times and it didn't work out. So he's the only one that actually didn't go to college. But there are 2 in college now, and I have 2 graduates, and one even went on to graduate school. So, and we just wanted to make that easy. So it just seemed like a really productive way to live out those teen years by having a more structured education. And it was okay because we were blessed with a really nice co-op, and so they were going and seeing their friends at this co-op. And so they took a lot of different, we had a great science teacher, so my kids were able to take biology and chemistry and physics from really good teachers. And my youngest daughter took literature classes, and the older ones did too, from people who really knew what they were doing. And so because of this great co-op, it was okay to do that. And also because their friend circle was doing stuff like that. And also we have a pretty good community college. Now you might not like, some of the kids going to community college are kind of they're kind of into drugs or drinking or whatever, but there's a lot of working adults also going. And a lot of homeschoolers go to the community college and dual enroll, and so they could do stuff like that. And my youngest daughter took a lot of homeschool connection classes. She liked those. She didn't go to the community college. So each and in my mind, it was more of a collaborative thing. So we would sit down and say, okay, what do you need to get this year? What are the credits you need to get? What are you thinking about? What's available out there? And then we would put together a program. But I'll just talk about a couple of things. So you have to learn a language, right? My oldest daughter rebelled. And so in her senior year, she enrolled in the community college, and she took Spanish. And 1 semester of college Spanish is the equivalent of a year in high school. So she got 2 years of Spanish. Now, I think ideally it should be 3, but it didn't stop her. Didn't hold her back at all. That she only had that 1 year in the community college. And then my oldest son, he really didn't quite make that curriculum, but that standard. but, I mean, he took some Latin, but it wasn't like a full 2 years of Latin. However, he went into a music conservatory and they didn't really care. So it didn't matter. And then starting with my middle son down, we all studied Latin together at a class that a local Latin teacher was giving. And so I studied right alongside. Well, it was my middle son that I studied with. And then after I'd done that, I was able to teach the younger two. So the way I would recommend studying Latin is to begin with William Linney's book, and I always forget the name of it, but I'll link. It's Getting Started with Latin, something like that. It's really easy, gentle introduction that's enjoyable, and you can just you can kind of unschool it because you can just pick it up and do a few exercises and put it down again. And it's for kids as young as, say, 3rd grade, if they're into it. And so start with that. And then what I really like, but these are expensive, so you might want to skip these, is the Latin for Children. Not the workbooks. You can do the workbooks later if you want to, but I think they just throw too much at you. But their DVDs are really fun, Latin for Children. And we would just watch the DVDs. It's kids reciting, and their vocabulary and chanting all the paradigms for the verbs and the nouns. And they would have silly little skits, and so it was just fun and catchy, so it would stick in your head. So if you just watched it over and over again, it would really stick in your head. So that was a fun way to learn Latin too. And then when we finally were really going to delve into it at the high school level, I would recommend Henle. Now this isn't what we studied. We studied various things with this Latin teacher, but I think if you can get through the first year of Henle, and there are various syllabi out there that can guide you through it. But if you can get through Henle, the first year of Henle, you're set. You're really set. I mean, there's still some of the higher grammar and stuff that you're going to need to know. But what we did was getting through enough of this that we could go to the National Latin Exam website and use their syllabi to guide us in our study. So then, because you get enough, you get enough knowledge under your belt that you feel a little bit, you get the way it works, and so you can go and say, oh, I don't understand how to do this yet. Let me focus on that. And there's so many resources online. You can find really neat resources online to practice particular things. So, but this is what I taught I taught Latin for a few years at a co-op, and this is what we use. So this is the one that I'm most familiar with, and it's Catholic, it's solid, it'll get the job done. Not the most exciting thing in the world, so it's good to add in some fun stuff if you can. And I can do another video on Latin and how to teach Latin. But once you get a nice intro with the Linney book, and then maybe doing the fun DVDs from Latin for Children, maybe you can get them secondhand or something, I don't know. Getting into this won't be that hard initially, and then you can sort of get into a groove and work through it. And there's a lot of helps for this too, but I'll make that a different video because this one's getting super long. So, and the other couple of things that I have here that were more high school is, I think I've already showed this before. This was just for copy work. This is a good thing for copy. You can see it's got a lot of love. And then also this, I love this one for teaching about poetry, stories in verse. This is an old book published by Calvert. And I found it used, and it's great. It's all narrative poems. Barbara Allen, like ballads, Robin Hood, Curfew Must Not Ring Tonight. Really good. It's really good analysis of poetry. And we just pick it up and read some poems and study about them, about why they work, what kind of rhythm were they using, and what made it catchy, what made it sing, So this one, it was another one. we really liked. And then this is just random stuff that I'm pulling up, but my husband taught economics to the kids, and he just used this one, but he liked it. It's the Glencoe. It's got business mixed in with economics, which he found a little bit annoying because he's sort of a purist. He just wanted to do economic theory and that sort of thing. But he found this easy to teach. So if you want to get your high schoolers to learn about economics, this was a good one. And then the one I really liked for teaching world history, I would teach world history along with history of the church. And so I do like, this is my favorite one from the DDK series. They've got a bunch of them, but this is the one I really, really liked. This was a good one. All right, so I have talked on long enough, and I don't know how helpful that was for you. We really went to curriculum for high school to make sure that we got those credit hours in so we could honestly put on a transcript that they had studied, you know, a certain number of things, and that according to our state, they had taken the required courses to be considered a high school graduate. So that's how we did things. Those were the curriculum that worked for me, curricula. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. I'm still doing the giveaway. I didn't have very much traffic from my last video, but I'm still doing that giveaway of the book, A Little Way of Homeschooling. So if anybody does want that, just comment. All right, talk to you later. Bye-bye.